Throughout this semester, I've had the opportunity to redefine my understanding of health. Like many other American students, I was unfamiliar with the unethical experiments in our nation's history that were hidden under the guise of scientific progress. I was taught that these torturous experiments were something foreign, that something like the Nazi medical experiments could never happen here. Many of our doctors in the late 20th century felt the same way. This is especially apparent in their disregard for the Nuremberg Code. One of the most unacceptable problems throughout America's scientific history has been not getting participants informed consent. This was most often seen through the exploitation of disadvantaged people in our society for the sake of scientific progress. Dr. Albert Clickman from the University of Pennsylvania is infamous for his Homesburg prison experiments. Clickman constantly dehumanized the prisoners. When he first got to Homesburg prison to investigate a case of athlete's foot, he said, "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing fertile fields for the first time." He was even quoted saying that prisoners were used because they're cheap and nobody gave a damn about what happened to them. It wasn't just Clickman's medical ambition that kept him going back to the prison for studies. It was also his greed. Clickman founded Ivy Research, which was funded by the U.S. Army and 33 pharmaceutical companies. A company called Ortho, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, was partnered with Clickman for his million-dollar discovery of Retin A. Retin A, also known as tretinoin, is an acne treatment that belongs to a group of vitamin A derivatives called retinoids. Tretinoin is used to treat severe acne vulgaris and is also used as an anti-wrinkle treatment. It's only available through prescription because it's so potent. I learned about Retin A for the first time when I was 14. I've never had bad acne, but my sister has. So one day when I ran out of face wash, I grabbed hers, and this was the result. I ended up calling my mom and telling her I needed to go to the emergency room because my face was so red and it felt like I had gotten stung by 1,000 bees. Keep in mind that this was the prescription dose, which is a really low concentration. My sister's face wash was at a 1% concentration. Dr. Clickman was conducting experiments at up to 100%. It was this severe skin irritation that turned other scientists away from Retin A research. But Dr. Clickman pushed on. He said, "I damn near killed people before I could see a real benefit. Every one of them got sick." In order to realize why tretinoin causes such irritation, let's look at how it works. Tretinoin can be applied topically, which means onto the skin, at concentrations of 0.025, 0.05, or 0.1. Then, it will bind to the cellular retinoic acid binding protein. The protein will take the tretinoin to the nucleus of basal keratinocytes, which are found under the skin, where it will bind to retinoic acid receptors or retinoid X receptors. These will bind to retinoic acid response elements on target genes, which activate transcription factors. The transcription factors activate the synthesis of heparin-binding epidermal growth factor, or HBEGF, and also amphiregulin, or AR. These will then bind to epidermal growth factor receptors on other cells, which will cause many more layers of basal keratinocytes to be formed. This is called proliferation. As the new layers build up and push off the old layers, it leaves them exposed, causing redness and irritation. These painful experiments left prisoners with distinct scarring patterns on their back. In fact, some of the ex-prisoners from Homesburg have said that they used the distinct scars to identify other people that were there at the same time. In Alan Hornblum's expose about the Homesburg prison experiments, he writes that many prisoners and their families now regard the medical profession as torturers rather than healers. These experiments are a perfect example of the justification of black iatrophobia that Harriet Washington is talking about in Medical Apartheid. In preparation for this video, I watched a recorded book club from the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle because my perspective on this subject is very limited. Prior to this meeting, the members had all read Acres of Skin. When discussing prison experiments, member Michelle had something to say.
I had the pleasure of talking to someone because I was checking up on Harriet Washington's writing today. So I spoke to a person who was actually in prison 5 years ago. They enlightened me on quite a few things. When they were in prison, there's a poster board they said, a bulletin board right there that had the experiments that are posted to 5 years ago. So I'm assuming that's still going on now. They need money to try to make their life comfortable. That was what this person told me, more comfortable or somewhat comfortable in prison.
Clickman's barbaric research methods, including those that led to the development of Retin A, are highly debated. To defend his reputation, Clickman has argued that his practices did not violate any ethical standards at the time. But any person that listens to the stories of the victims of medical experimentation can't argue that the torturous procedures were fully justified, no matter what the regulations were. These regulations have changed through the years, which affects how experiments will be performed to define and understand health. Hornblum argues at the end of his book that America's medical history is not the patriotic story that is taught in our schools. He warns against the conspiracy of silence that enables abuse when there is violation of ethics but not necessarily the law when pursuing scientific progress.